3 years ago, I did a video about the then new Tamron 50-300mm di3RXD. This is the successor to that lens, and it is the Tamron 50-300 di3 VC VXD. Nice and long. And there are really 4 things that are updates or upgrades with this lens over that one from 3 years ago. The first is it's wider at 50mm versus 70. Second is it now has lens stabilization built in, so vibration compensation is what Tamron calls it. Third is it now has a linear motor controlling its autofocus. And fourth, it can function as a 50% macro, so you can get 1 to 2 magnification with this thing. Now this is a full frame Sony E-mount lens, but it's one of the few that is small enough and light enough to where I could see people buying this for their APS-C cameras. So in this video, I'm going to review this lens on my Sony A6100. So let's jump in. This lens comes in a white box. Inside there are some manuals and warranty info, and really that's it. Well, you get the lens obviously, but there are no zippered bags or additional accessories. You get a lens hood that I hate to say is cheap feeling, and a plastic front and rear lens cap. I've owned my Tamron 28-75 G2 for a few years now, and if you look at these two lenses side by side, you can see that this 50-300 has received the G2 treatment. The shape, design, materials, it all seems to be following the new Tamron recipe. And I have to admit, it's a big step up from the Tamron lenses of old. In terms of build quality, this still doesn't feel as premium as some Sigma and Sony zooms, but it also doesn't cost as much as those lenses anyway. I think Tamron has found a good balance between build and budget. This new lens is just under 6 inches in length and weighs an impressively little 665 grams. And although the body is made out of plastic, I'm not complaining about the build quality. The only thing I will say is that when not on a camera that is powered on, there is a loose lens element that rattles around inside. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount, electronics, and a rubber gasket around the mount. Tamron says that this lens has moisture-resistant quote-unquote construction, so it is semi-weatherproof. On the side, this lens is made in Vietnam, whereas the 28-75 G2 is made in Japan. There is a USB-C port here that supports the Tamron lens utility software, and then we get to the first ring. This is the manual focus ring, and it's smooth, light, grippy, completely electronic, so it rotates infinitely. In the middle, there are lens specs, a zoom lock switch to lock the lens at 50mm, 67mm filter thread designed in Japan, and a focus set button that can be assigned various functions through that Tamron lens utility that I mentioned. There is a Tamron logo here right next to the zoom ring, and this zoom ring is good. It's smooth, well damped, requiring a good balance of force to rotate it. It also shows no signs of lens creep, so if you have it extended to 100mm and walk around with the lens down, it should stay in place and not zoom into 300mm like some lenses. Zooming does extend the barrel of this lens by about 3 inches, and with the lens hood attached, now you have yourself a long lens. Around the front, there is a large front lens element with no writing or specs here, nice and clean. Inside, there are 19 elements in 14 groups, a number of which are special lens elements designed to suppress aberrations and ghosting. I mentioned the linear motor, which is Tamron's VXD mechanism, and that all-important VC vibration compensation stabilization, which Tamron says under 100mm uses some sort of AI tech to provide additional compensation. Here it is mounted on my A6100, and for a telephoto with a 6x range, it doesn't look or feel too out of place. Yes, it's still a big lens, but most telephotos are, so this is to be expected. Now, undoubtedly today there will be a few dozen reviews of this lens on various full-frame Sony lens bodies, but there's a reason that I wanted to use the A6100 specifically, because it's an entry-level APS-C camera and it has no in-body image stabilization or IBIS. So there is no way to cheat the stabilization. The only stabilization that you will see coming out of the sample videos and the photos is what is provided by this lens. Let's take a look at what this combo can do. So all of these videos, all of these photos are straight out of my A6100, unedited, uncorrected, unprocessed. This is what you can get. Ready, set, go. Alright, so this is a telephoto lens with good optical performance, and there are a couple key, very nice positives. In terms of sharpness, this lens is great. It's plenty sharp across the frame with good lighting conditions. The corners do get a little bit softer than the center, but not enough to be exceptionally noticeable. Colors and contrast are both excellent. What you get are very natural looking images with a little bit of pop. Distortions are well controlled as long as you have in-camera corrections turned on. Barrel distortion seems to be a non-issue in my samples. Vignetting was also not an issue as I shot all of these samples on APS-C. Chromatic aberration does show up, but it's surprisingly well controlled. However, longitudinal chromatic aberration did show up. As you can see, out of focus high contrast areas seem to show some purple fringing. Flaring is well controlled with just a little bit of flare that shows up when shooting at the sun, but interestingly, it's almost like this flare breaks off into two. As you can see, a second flare that moves about, and that has to be that internal optical stabilization element. Anyway, for me, I'm happy with the flare performance. Bokeh rendering is nice. You don't get huge bokeh balls because you are shooting f4.5 up to 6.3, but on the telephoto side, you do get enough compression and subject separation and some medium-sized bokeh balls, and they are smooth, nice circles because again, I am shooting APS-C, no outlining or odd textures, nothing distracting either, so well done, Tamron. In terms of autofocus, this is up there with some of Tamron's best lenses. It's silent, fast, mostly accurate, and I say mostly because this telephoto, like every other telephoto that I've tested, including many Sonys, sometimes just doesn't focus where you want it to. And that's why some lenses have focus limiter switches in them so you can tell the lens to focus within 5 meters or beyond 5 meters, for example. This lens doesn't have that, but whether in photo or video mode, I didn't have any abnormal issues. It felt just like using a native Sony telephoto when I was out taking samples. The big surprise and a huge plus is that new vibration compensation because it's really, really good. The best way I can describe it is imagine if you are hand holding your camera and this lens, and as soon as you hit that record button, invisible tripod legs emerge from the lens and all of a sudden those little shakes just disappear. It's pretty cool. A few of these samples are me hand holding my camera at effectively 450mm with some wind, and the stabilization that this lens provides on its own is staggering. If you couple this with a body with IBIS, it should theoretically get even better. Now, I won't say that the stabilization is better than the one in the Sony 70-350. It might be, but it's been a long time since I've owned that Sony. But I will say that if you have the older version of this Tamron, the stabilization alone is enough to justify an upgrade. Another good thing I noticed is that focus breathing is nearly non-existent with this lens paired with my A6100. However, I will say that the focus ring is very quick to rack from one extreme to the next, which I personally liked, but it might take some time to get used to for those micro adjustments to get everything just right. Now, this isn't the best lens for fast action, for low light work, or for compelling portraiture. Shooting at 300mm and f6.3 is sharp because f6.3 is significantly darker than f2.8. It's the equivalent of shooting an f2.8 zoom stop down, and of course it should be sharp. Now on APS-C you get the advantage of using the center, more sharp portion of the lens as well, but this is par for the course for a compact telephoto. All of them have variable apertures around that f4 to f6.3 range. If you wanted an f2.8 zoom, it's going to be at least twice this big and twice as heavy, and so far I've never seen a 6x f2.8 zoom anyway. All in all, I think this is a great telephoto option from Tamron, and there are several reasons that you might justify picking this up over the Sony 70-350 that I've mentioned many times in this video. The first is if you want that extra width on the telephoto side, that 50mm, which on an APS-C is a lot. It does make a difference. The second is if you want a lens that you can use down the line or with your full frame cameras, then this is obviously the one. The third is if you want a more budget-friendly option, this is the one out of the two. And the fourth is if you want a lens with a 6-year warranty instead of Sony's 1-year warranty, then this Tamron is the one. I'm not saying that the Sony is a bad lens. I think optically they are near identical. The Sony is about half an inch shorter and it gives you that 350mm reach versus 300. And because it's been out for a while, you can pick it up on sale. But if I didn't own either one with a price of $799 US, I would take a serious look at this telephoto for my own APS-C setup. And that is it for my review of this new Tamron 50-300. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. As always, if you want to read more about this lens, pre-order it, buy your own, check prices, use that link down in the description. Special thank you goes out to Tamron for sending this loaner lens out to me. I do have to send it back, unfortunately. And a bigger thank you goes out to you guys for watching these videos. Thank you so much for your support. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.